there. Bad week for me. As I started off saying, Happy Wine Wednesday. Hope your week was much better than mine. I had some back issues and I've been in bed all week and, it's just been a week. Anyways, we're here now. We're happy to have everyone with us. Sorry to keep everyone waiting. Excellent topic this week, so I'm going to jump right to it. If you have any more audio issues or visual issues, you let me know and we'll get this all fixed by next week. And I did mention that if anyone wants to join in the video call, we still welcome you. We still want you to come. Last week we had some issues, so from now on you have to just go through me or Dan to get in. And those links to speak with us via Messenger are on Seahorse Whisperer Society, or if you need them, just comment and we can hook up with you in Messenger while the stream is live. No problem. And we always see you in chat, and thank you very much. I think it was Dylan or whoever was saying that the audio was bad. I got to go over there and see the chat while I'm talking now. But okay, let's get started. Edit that first part out, good times. And our topic this week was dealing with nuisance algae. And, we're basically thinking in a seahorse tank because you have such high organics. It's even more of an issue in a seahorse tank than it is in a reef. But if you're here and you have your reef, then, we will be happy to talk to you too. Okay, so the first question was, does every seahorse tank go through that ugly algae phase due to high organics? And does anybody have any thoughts on that? Did every single one of your tanks go through an algae phase?
Yes.
And then no one else is piping up, but I'm gonna bet that every single one of you went through it. Dan, did you have a
Mine
comment?
haven't.
Well, tell me
Yeah,
why.
mine have because mine are bare bottom and they're scrubbed daily and they're production tanks.
Yeah.
Cheryl, I'm guessing you're in the same boat, right?
Yeah, well, the nursery's tanks, the grow-out tanks that are all bare bottom and clean daily are fine. The ones that I have set up where I have live macro and tan and stuff like that, quite frankly, they can be a real pain.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And just
Every
go ahead.
I can say every saltwater tank I've set up has gone through an ugly phase while it's been cycling.
Absolutely. And there's someone else trying to say. I was going to say, you guys, also because I think because I'm in this with you, it's getting a little static. Just when you're not speaking, just mute yourself, and you can always raise your hand if we're all talking over you. But just mute yourself if you're not speaking for the static. But no, I'm with you, Marina. I'm talking my reef tank, every seahorse tank except for the small like nursery tanks or any kind of when I set up the tubs for the fry or the grow out tanks that they, as Dan pointed and Cheryl pointed out, were cleaned daily, wiped daily, weren't set up like a long-term, seahorse tank. But most people watching this are going to be hobbyists who aren't, breeding and are actually interested in setting up a tank and hate that they see this ugly algae growing all over the tank, the seahorses, the snails. This actually started because of a question from Laura that said, what are you supposed to do about when algae begins to grow on seahorses and snails? And before we get to that point, I just wanted to make clear that every tank, if you're not doing the daily cleaning and the super califragilistic maintenance and filtration or for a production tank, you're gonna go through that algae phase. Most of you will already know that there's the nitrogen cycle, and you got to go through the ammonia and the nitrite and then the nitrates before you have a cycle tank. But right when that's finished, you begin, in my opinion, and there's a great thread about this. I think it's on Reef to Reef. I will post it when we're done, but about the algae cycle. And there truly is one. And so every time I see someone post and ask about nuisance algae in their seahorse tank or their tank, the first thing I say is, how old is the tank? Because people set up a saltwater tank. They want it to be beautiful, like the ones they see online, and they don't know. Nobody mentioned to them that you're gonna go through an algae phase if you want to have a long-term setup established tank. So you can do constant maintenance and set up a production, but if you want the long-term tank, you're gonna go through the brown algae, the green algae, sometimes the red algae, and then if you just leave it alone through that, it cycles itself out. And it really does. Now, in a seahorse tank, but while I've said that, in a seahorse tank, that's a little different because you're dealing with such high organics. So I'm just going to ask Holly really quickly. When you had the algae problems in your tank, was it within the first year? Because the year is usually what it takes to
Uh,
get.
I still do. I'm on year 2 with
Okay.
my tank, and I mean, in the beginning, earlier, there was like the bubble algae and the red stuff earlier, like within the first year. It hit a point a little over a year where the algae kind of disappeared
Right.
for the most part
Yep.
on its own. Now, at this stage, I'm about 2 years in, maybe a little bit more, and I've got green hair algae, but less than I used to have because I expanded my filtration system and there's a little bit less phosphates,
Yep.
and my nitrates are running. They're showing up as 0, but I know they're there because stuff's growing. So
Yep.
probably not high above 0. So the water's running, but I still have phosphates. So yeah, I've got green hair algae in my tank right now still, and I just pull it out by hand.
Well, I was gonna say, as long as it's not bugging you, it's cool. And you just literally hit the nail on the head. That's what the typical tank will do. Is if you set up your aquarium and you let it cycle through the algae phases, then you're gonna get to a point where it equals itself out. Unless your filtration's not good enough. You're frankly, if you had to up your filtration, my opinion is you're extremely lucky that you even went through a phase where there was no algae. So you got to set it up right to begin with.
I can't explain it, but it happened. It was brief, it was golden, but
I know.
it came back. But I've got a huge skimmer. My skimmer's rated for a tank about 3 times my size.
Heck yeah, and that's what I
So
know
there you
that
go.
we're going to talk about what people do to deal with algae very quickly. I just wanted to kind of point out the fact that if you're within the first year, I've just and Nicole, I think we've talked about it on the side too.
That was the worst.
Yeah, and it's really difficult to sit there and just watch it grow and go away. But if you're pretty sure, and you can always ask for help, and there are other ideas. If you did something that worked, like Mermaid's Reef, you're saying just get some more snails. And I'm going to look at the other comments in a moment. There are lots of things that work, and more snails would be a great thing to do during the first year. But Dan and Ray have pointed out in previous videos that those snails, even though they take care of the algae, they're also expelling the organics, which
Yeah.
just create more algae. So,
Yeah.
and you really have to deal with the organics is the bottom line. But if you've set up properly, then you sometimes just have to get through it. Now, if you're hitting a year and you haven't or if you're just seeing the brown and the brown algae never goes away, it doesn't seem to cycle into the green, then we need to look at filtration, is my opinion. But anyways, just wanted to
Kelly,
cover that. Go ahead, Cheryl.
one thing real quick. One of my tanks, I decided that I wanted to do some photosynthetic gorgonians in there.
Yes.
And so I started bringing up the lighting because I needed the lighting for them. Well, the next thing I know, I had a cyano outbreak.
Yep.
And that's something to think of too. So I've since, of course, cut the lights back, and it's all dying off. It's going away. But all of a sudden, I went from like white sand to red sand overnight.
And I'm so glad you brought that up because cyano's a little different. It's not really in the algae cycling phase
No.
that I'm talking about. That's different, and there are many ways. And we're going to cover, guys, as we go through this, each type of algae and what we do to deal with it and everything like that. So, or actually, let's see. The next question is, are there tricks to avoiding nuisance algae? And we've already said, if you're within the year, you can up filtration, you can add snails. What else did you guys do within the first year? Because, and I'm sorry, I keep rambling, but because the thing is, with my first Seahorse tank, I fought the algae. I did things like, my first Seahorse tank was a macroalgae display, but I was still fighting those nuisance algae because it was cycling through the algae phases. And it drove me crazy. And finally, one day, Felicia McCulley said, because I'd message her and show her cyan all over everything, or brown diatoms everywhere, and I'd be like, my beautiful tank is being destroyed by these stupid algae, and she'd be like, chillax, you're gonna have algae in a tank. Calm down, But what did you guys do within the first year and after? What was your Obviously, Holly just shared that, she just yanks the green after she got through the cycling. But Nicole, I know I think when we first started talking, you were asking about Vibrant. I can't remember. Did you ever try it?
I did, and it actually led to more problems for me. So
Right, I remember. And again, guys, just a note: anything we talk about on this channel, if it works for you, it works for you. And I want to hear about it in the comments because it's different for different tanks. But Nicole, it didn't work for. So what have you done since? I'm curious.
Well, I got the new tank, so everything was transferred over.
Right.
However, originally I thought I had the blue-green cyano, and I've figured out since then, I'm pretty sure it was dinos. And a little bit of it transferred over to my new tank, even though I tried to be careful, but I needed the rock and everything, so I had to transfer it over. But I just did like a 4-day blackout, not blackout, but I kept the lights off, and it actually has helped quite a bit. And I'm also dosing some peroxide. So I'm hoping, we'll see. And I'm just siphoning it out too as I see it. But yeah, it's always something. It's always something fun.
And I am actually going to try to see my mentor in reefing. Dan and Cheryl and Felicia and them were my mentors in seahorse keeping, but my mentor in reefing was cruise areas. And he has tackled the problem of dinos, which is not, absolutely not, in that algae phase that I discussed. When I said brown, I meant diatoms. When I said green, I meant the hair and all of that. But dinos are a different breed, just like cyano. They're just not in that. That's something you do have to be concerned with. And he has a method that's called bubbling, micro bubbling, that I'd love to introduce you to, but I'm not going to talk endlessly about it today because I'd rather try to get him in here. He's had some medical issues recently, but I'm going to message him and see if he'd be willing to come on maybe next week and discuss dinos, because that's a whole other topic. If you've got dinos,
Yeah, that would be great. I'm also going to grab a UV sterilizer this week and put that in the sump because I'm hoping, let's see if the combination.
Yep.
That's all I can do.
I can tell you overall, the combination that worked for me was using a line of products for dosing, but everybody doesn't have to do that. What really worked was the microbubbling and peroxide. So you've already got half of what worked for me, just to let you know. So
good.
And anyone else who has dealt with dinos and came up with something that worked, absolutely let us know. And the difference, I would say, and I'd love your opinion, Nicole, but the difference between regular turf or diatom, any kind of that kind of brown algae, and the dinoflagellates, I probably say it wrong, is that they look snotty and they look like they have a bubble at the end of them. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it's not technically an algae, right? It's a bacteria.
You're right.
Like similar to cyano, it's like a slime bacteria. It's gross. Either way, it's disgusting.
And it never goes away. And that's one algae that the more you try to clean it, the more it reminds me of Caulerpa releasing spores and going everywhere in the tank and just making it worse. So yes, I mean, anyone who wants to dig in right now, we absolutely can. But I think we should go through the questions, and I'll try to get Cruz in here if he's able next week, because he can explain microbubbling, because it absolutely worked for me. And I do see some questions coming up. Dan, do you want to answer that live about the peroxide?
Well, I have never used peroxide for that purpose, but I can say that peroxide can be very handy, and it, for certain things if you use it properly, as long as it's not overdosed, so it doesn't knock out your biofilter, it can be very handy. Just out of curiosity, Mermaid, how much peroxide? What ratio of peroxide per gallons or liters were you using?
Me? Oh, I'm using. I don't know if you're talking to me or Mermaid's Reef.
I was talking to Mermaid because she said she used peroxide to knock out her.
I didn't see it.
Her dinos.
Yeah,
so
but
I'm just curious how much she used.
And I was going to say, it takes people in the chat a second to respond. So Nicole, what was your rate?
Yes.
Just out of curiosity. Sorry.
Well, what the research that I did, it said to do 1 ml per 10 gallons. So between the sump and the tank, I'm doing like 90 I have 90 gallons roughly. So I'm doing like 9 milliliters a day.
Wow, and
What
mermaids.
percent are,
So
what
Sorry.
percent are hydrogen peroxide?
It's just the 3%.
and how much were you using, Nicole?
1 ml per 10 gallons.
1 ml per 10 gallons. So you got 33. So that's a pretty low dose. Mermaid was using 1 to 2 mLs per gallon of 3%.
Oh, that's
Um,
and that's safe without
that's,
knocking out the biofiltration.
well, I have to do some mental calculations. I use 1 ml for a 100-gallon tank with 37%, and that's 12 times as strong. Um, you can you can generally go up to about 8 to 9 parts per million um, without knocking out your biofilter on a single dose. Repeated doses, you may start seeing your nitrite spike at that dosing. Um, but at the dose that you're doing, it's so low that I wouldn't even worry about it. 1 to 2 parts per million, you're not going to do anything to your biofilter. When you start getting above 10 parts per million, then you can start. The first thing to go will be the nitrobacter, and um, it'll usually bounce right back if you hold up on the dosing.
I was
Now,
trying to.
Mermaid also
Sorry.
dosed the Fritz in her tank,
Yes.
and um, that can help too.
Yeah.
Basically, you're replacing whatever you knock back, but depending upon the level that you're dosing, 3% peroxide has about 30 to 33 milligrams per ml. So if you convert your tank over to liters, you can figure out how many parts per million very easily.
And I was
Okay,
trying.
and
Go ahead, Nicole.
sorry.
No,
No,
go
oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. No, a lot of people were also recommending, or from the posts that I've read, the Dr. Tim's
Yes.
waste away. But now I'm super nervous about adding back, any kind of bacteria, because my tank had some green hair algae that got on my nerves, and that's why I started adding the Vibrant. And then once I started using that religiously, that's when all hell broke loose.
Right. Hold up. Okay, so a couple things really quick, and then I'm going to respond to what you just said. First of all, Mermaid's Reef, I was trying not to interrupt Dan, but I was going to say that. That's exactly what I did in my tank. I used microbubbling and peroxide. I would literally take it wasn't dosing peroxide. I would take the amount of peroxide that Cruz told me I was allowed to use in that time. I'd have to look it up. Probably what you used. I'm curious if you worked with Cruz. And then I would take the amount that I was going to use for that session, that day, or that time. I think I did it twice a day. But I would use it and use a syringe to actually go and just kill the suckers right where they were. So I've used that on green hair algae, on all sorts of algae. It only works with some, but when it works, it works. And if you squirt those directly on the algae with peroxide, you watch it turn white in like a few hours. It's dead. It's gone. It's done. Dosing the tank.
Mine as like an individual soak, like for like anything artificial, like the yellow chains and
Yes.
plastic decorations, I'll do a peroxide soak for them now and then.
Mhm.
And I have done live rock. You can actually do, if you don't have corals and stuff, it's just the live rock. You can do it a certain percentage for a certain amount of time. I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly what that is, but I've done that. And my purple coralline algae lived through it, did great. Algae didn't grow back for months.
Yep. Peroxide's amazing. And just to go back to thank you, because that's a great point, and I do that too. I absolutely agree. And with Mermaid's Reef, I was trying not to say anything, but that after I did the peroxide, apparently it dissipates quickly. So it works. And then the key to anything like this, guys, is that you got to have a skimmer catching the dead stuff. Because if you don't have a skimmer catching the dead stuff that the peroxide just did some, killed or whatever, then you're going to end up, it's just feeding new algae. So even though you've killed the algae, it's feeding new. So you've got to have a skimmer removing it. That's why I gave up on even trying Vibrant, just for the record, is because my skimmer was broken. And absolutely, I actually use Dr. Tim's One and Only, and I use Dr. Tim's, I believe, Waste Away in my get rid of algae in my reef program. So again, I'll have crews come and give you specifics, hopefully next week, or at least get them to write something out. But Fritz nitrifying bacteria, it's, what's the name of it, Mermaid's Reef? I always forget. It's, isn't it 9 or something like that?
Yeah, Fritz Syme 9 or something like that.
Well, there's a couple different ones, and I feel badly because they're great, and I work with them at MACN every year, and they've sponsored the stream and everything else. So I need to get my facts down, but they've got quite a few really great products that really do work. They're the second, they're quite equal to Dr. Tim's. I would say those are the two #1 choices.
Are you thinking about Fritzheim?
Yes.
Yeah,
But
Fritzheim 9 and 900.
yes,
There's the two of them. Yeah.
okay,
Yep.
great.
If you watch the freshwater forums, there's a lot of freshwater people that use peroxide for killing algae.
Absolutely. And I can tell you I've done it in the reef too. But okay, so obviously we got off track, but very important topic. And Nicole, what did you say? Because I was going to respond to that. You said you said you were afraid to use anything after you used Vibrant and it went bad.
Yeah,
Okay.
because a lot of people use Waste Away by Dr. Tim, but I'm like, I don't know about. I'm just so scared about it now.
Well, the other thing I'm going to do when we're finished here is link. Dr. Tim's has an actual site that tells you what you can use with what and what'll happen if you use something with what. It's really great. And it helped me because there are certain things that, you know, if you don't know, you don't know. So I'll link that when we're done. But I've never had a problem with Waste Away or any of those. But you do have to read the instructions, and using them with other things does matter. So I don't want to speak wrong. But I can also say that they're different products. Vibrant does claim it's bacteria based, but Vibrant also didn't release their ingredients for a very long time, which they have every right to, proprietary, blah, blah, blah. But every time I asked, I actually got in a little tiff with them, and that's the reason I decided to try the product, because I was mad that they wouldn't tell me the ingredients. I don't want to put something in my tank if I didn't know what it was. And I believe they have since released the ingredients for the record, but it's literally like this much bacteria, this much amino acids, and this much other ingredients, so they still don't tell you. Anyways, point being, I think there's more than bacteria in the Vibrant. So I think it's a big top secret, but I think using straight nitrifying or sludge eating bacteria is different. And I want to be clear also, and then I'll stop rambling, guys, that when I'm talking about replenishing the tank with bacteria, I would be talking about one and only, or the Fritzheim or 900, not the sludge eating. And I believe Waste Away is a product that you use in different circumstance. So let's get back to that, Nicole, next week. I promise. Okay, go on, Dan.
The Fritzheim, the 9 is live nitrifying bacteria.
Right.
The 900 is the turbo start, which is a higher concentration.
It works much better.
Right.
Huge
Well,
difference.
it's basically the same thing, just more concentrated.
Yeah.
And my only point was they like Dr. Tim's, have other products that are more sludge eating instead of nitrifying bacteria.
Yes.
There's different. Okay. So that's all I was trying to say. Sorry. And anyone can pipe up with other questions. All right. So I didn't ask anybody else. Go ahead, Marina.
I was just going to say, with those different kinds of bacteria, and I might be wrong, I'm not sure, but I think or maybe I've heard it, but stuff like your Dr. Tim's one and only, your cycling bacterias reproduce in the aquarium, whereas I think some of the ones more targeted for eating algae, they sort of die off and then they're gone, which is why you have to dose them. I might not be quite right, but
you are right, and sorry, I'll let you finish, Dan, but you are right, Marina, and I actually do dose my nitrifying bacteria also, especially if I'm using peroxide, because you're kind of killing some off. But you're right, and that's why I'm saying in a case where you're treating the tank and possibly killing off the nitrifying, that's why I dose the nitrifying. If you're going to use the sludge eating, that's a different circumstance. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was going to say there's different types of bacteria that people put in different products, and you have to read the label carefully if they list it. Some products have live bacteria, some products have enzymes. There's a variety of different things they can put in the products. I can tell you that both Fritz and Dr. Tim's do put on the products that say nitrifying bacteria, they do have nitrifying bacteria in them. But there's a bunch of products on the market. And it gets confusing because some of them say they're probiotics, some of them say they're
Yep.
bacteria, some of them say this, they say that, and it can get real confusing. I like products that tell me exactly what's in it. I don't care about what the percentages are necessarily, but I like to know what's in the product before I put it in my tank.
Sure, and I would also say that when you use the things like, and this is why I want to get some clarification and get Cruz in here next week before I actually give out any information, because in my thought process, what I understand is to use the sludge eating the algae removing types of bacteria that are not nitrifying. That's typically a product that you would use instead of using like peroxide. So I would be fearful of telling you to put that in after you've used peroxide, because I think that's double doing it. Of course, you're at a low dose. So yeah, Nicole, we're gonna get back to that next week to be sure.
One
But
thing
go ahead,
One
sure.
thing to keep in mind too, some of these products dramatically reduce your O2 saturations,
Yep.
and you can turn a tank hypoxic very rapidly if you're not paying attention to it. And you need to be, especially with seahorses, you really need to be think about that. Like
Absolutely.
chemically is one classic example.
Absolutely. Hey, really quick, I wanted to say, Salty, I'm sorry I missed you. We need to get you back in here really quickly, but I wanted to give you a shout out. Wanted to say hi to Farm Boys Reef Club. So glad you joined us. Tell me about your experience dealing with nuisance algae in your tanks, because you've had quite a few and might be doing seahorses soon. So let's chat about that. Tell me in the comments, or if you want to join, let me know. But anybody else? What other tricks, guys? Ray, um, anybody, what tricks do you use to avoid nuisance algae?
Haven't really had the problem with seahorse tanks,
Really?
probably because it's bare bottom.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
I
may
would.
have had, in the early years, but I honestly don't remember. But I know now what I call nuisance algae now is this reddish purple stuff that grows on my glass. And every 10 days, I got to clean it off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different from the red algae that you sent me pictures of, right?
No, that's what I'm talking about.
Well, you could sell that in the U.S., just to let you know, because people love that stuff in the U.S.
It's not coralline.
I know. I know. People
Oh,
love the red
oh no,
algae.
no. What I'm talking, no, this is different.
Okay.
I sent you pictures of what was on the glass. It's a coating on the glass and on the decor and on the rocks, but it's not coralline. Coralline is harder. This is hard to get off when I use the magnets. And so sometimes I use the razor blade, but with coralline, I definitely have to use a razor blade, and it comes off. You can feel that it's a harder material when you're taking off than what this stuff is. No, those other pictures you're talking about now, I don't call that nuisance.
That's macros, right? Okay,
Yeah, that's
I was
macro.
confusing. I'm sorry, I was confusing. And guys, when I get done here, I will try to post a picture of Ray's nuisance algae. Maybe we can, or Ray, if you want to pull it up, if you have time now and share the screen, we can try to
Well,
deduce
I
what
don't
it is.
keep stuff like that.
Okay, well, I do. So I'll post it when we're done, or if I get a chance while you guys are talking, I'll pull it up. But the other thing I would say is, we discussed at the very beginning, you're going to go through the year the year algae cycle in most tanks, unless you're willing to do the maintenance like Ray and everybody are willing to do. They do water changes every week or even every day in some cases in a nursery tank, and they set up their tanks ahead of time with heavy buku filtration to make sure that the organics are taken care of. Did I say that correctly, Dan? Or what would you say are tricks to avoiding nuisance algae?
Well, in a production system, it's much different because we're scrubbing the tank down instead of relying on a natural system. We have good biological and good mechanical filtration, but when you've got sand and macros and rock and things like that, you can't do what we do to a production tank
Yep.
or a bare bottom system.
Yep.
So, the one time that I did try to set up a tank like that, the hair algae got so bad it overtook the whole tank, and we let it go. We let it run its course, and The whole time we had the hair algae, if you check the parameters, they're all spot on because the algae was absorbing all the stuff.
Yep.
And the seahorses liked it. It was a great tank for the seahorses. It just looked like crap.
Fuzzy seahorses, fuzzy green seahorses.
Yep.
I've never
Well,
had
why
hair
the
algae
tank
in a
is.
seahorse tank. Now, many years before I got into seahorses, I had my main reef tank was just overrun with the damn stuff.
Mm.
And I spent probably the better part of a year, if not longer, periodically pulling the rocks out, scrubbing them down, putting them in, back in again, trying to go with lights off for a period of time, but that was only a temporary remedy. And then when you went back to using the lights again, the hair algae came right back. And I ended up, in the end, controlling my input of the food. And I cut right down on the food input. Nothing in the tank suffered except for the hair algae, and I never had hair algae again.
Right? No, it's usually something we're doing wrong. I certainly agree. Hey, Farm Boy, thank you for the super chat. You're awesome. Mwah. And I think that you actually did a Saturday night stream about whether you use sand or not in a reef tank. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd love to hear, or everybody should check out that stream to see what they figured out in their stream. But I agree with what you guys are saying. Has anyone else that's in the video now had the experience where a sanded tank just seemed to have more problems than a bare bottom? Marina, were you going to say something? I thought I heard you pipe up. No?
No, but I've got sand in my tanks. But I don't really have a bare bottom tank to compare them to.
Right.
With the exception of sort of kind of temporary tanks, say for quarantining or holding for whatever reason, which I don't think is really a fair comparison anyway.
Gotcha. I'm sorry, I wasn't laughing at you. And Marina, you're the static, so mute yourself.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think you have the, you're like playing the YouTube or something in the background. Maybe just mute that when you come back. No worries. And Farm Boy's making me laugh saying, eels are great, mermaid. And talking about his eel tank. And I was asking about seahorse tanks, so it just kind of made me giggle. But I can't yet. Check out his eel tanks for sure. They're amazing. What else? Nicole, go ahead, Holly.
Tank with sand. I have basically, it's a reef tank, but no coral. So I have live rock and I have a sand bed and crushed coral and all that. And then the tanks that I'm raising the fry in are bare bottom. So it's two totally different things. But yeah, the one the adults are in, yeah, there's algae. I've just kind of learned to live with it.
Sure. And Farm Boy made the point that sand is very beneficial. So when we hear the production tanks of Dan or the serious long-term tanks of Cheryl and Ray, a lot of people want a natural looking tank like Marina, and I get it. I've done it both ways, and I will tell you, I do have more problems with tanks that have sand. I just always have, as far as nuisance algae go. Now, are they better overall for the display? Who knows? I think that it depends on when you're talking about a reef. Like a reef tank, sand is. Go ahead. I can hear you trying to interrupt, Dan. Go ahead.
Well, the difference is like when we're doing a production tank, our stocking density is too high. So, if I've got 50 to 75 seahorses in 75 gallons, there's no way I can siphon up off the sand bed. And there's no way that things are going to break down in a timely manner. I have to manually clean its system.
Yeah.
And people that overstock their seahorses tank are going to have a similar issue. If you go with a light stocking density, if I was going to set up a display tank, I would set up with a very light stocking density. I would have sand and rock. I wouldn't have a lot of rock, but I'd have some rock, and I would be focused on macros.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually what the other thing that I was going to say. And Farm Boy mentioned cleanup crew. We talked about that a little bit earlier. absolutely a cleanup crew helps. But in a seahorse tank, it's just a little bit different because you don't have coral taking things up. And usually, I'd say 50% of seahorse tanks don't have sand. It's just, we've learned that it's easier without sand. It's not as natural looking. Marina's tanks are beautiful, but I've done it both ways, and I personally prefer bare bottom for a seahorse tank, not for a reef. And the cleanup crew, we've mentioned a couple times, is excellent and for sure necessary and keeps the display looking nice. But if you're talking about snails or crabs or whatever that will consume the things in the sand and keep things cleaner, or like pick the algae off the rocks, that's great, but they still flush, they still go the other way. They eat it, but then they flush it and it becomes organics. In a seahorse tank, it just gets to be too much. So I love Dan's point of overstocking, because most of the time, if you get through that year mark and you have left it alone and gone through the algae cycle, brown, green, possibly red, and let it go and let it clear up, and you're still having problems, and we look at the situation, you're typically going to find your filtration's not good enough, your cleanup crew is not good enough, or your stocking density is too high. So agreed. And I'm not saying not good enough. We've all made the mistakes, guys. Don't get me wrong, for sure.
Well, one thing you can do too is put it in it. You can use an algae scrubber.
I was going to say it. Go ahead.
A tremendous job. And if you don't want to do that, get some ketomorpha, put a light in the sump. If you have a sump, that will take the place of an algae scrubber in many respects. You can also increase your flow, which really cuts down on nuisance algae. And put a wave maker or a power head in there.
Absolutely. I think you're right. Flow is one of the other reasons that people end up with nuisance algae, is because they don't have it positioned correctly or high enough, and people are afraid to put flow in a seahorse tank. And we've all discussed many times it's so necessary. And thank you, Cheryl, because that's what I do. That's my I was trying to let everybody else give their way they do it, and every answer was great, but that's my answer. Scrubbers, refugiums, macros, even in the display. In the display doesn't work as well. In the display is more for appearance and beauty, and still awesome. But the algae that you would put in a sump, in a refugium or on the scrubber, is going to just take care of, outcompete the nuisance algae much quicker.
Well, why do you have algae? You've got nutrients.
Yeah.
If you eliminate the nutrients, the algae feeding off the nutrients, give your tank an algae scrubber where you can let the algae grow.
And harvest it. That's what's important. Yeah. Sorry, Dan. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing is, the better your mechanical filtration, the less there is to break down and add to the mess.
Ooh, good
so, point. Our method of doing it, because we have such a high bio load, the biological filter can handle it. But in addition to having a filter sock, we run a cartridge filter with 5 microns, which filters a tremendous amount of stuff out that most people don't filter down to that level.
Absolutely. And Farm Boy also mentioned PO4, phosphates, absolutely, phosphates and nitrates, but even Holly mentioned way earlier that when you've got algae, nuisance algae growing, it's taking up the phosphates. So you could get a 0 and still have high phosphates. They're just being, as Dan just said, taken up by the nuisance algae. So I don't know, but I guess seahorse keepers don't focus in on that, because we just know we got to fix it. Is that a good way to put it, you guys?
The thing is, if you do that, when you start removing the green hair algae or whatever, guess what? You are removing what's eating the phosphates, and therefore you're creating a problem for yourself if you're not doing the water changes and finding an alternative to cut down on the nutrients. And I think that's where a lot of people fail, is they think, oh, I got to get rid of this. I have to get rid of it. Then they realize, oh, it's coming back.
Yeah, of course. And that's why I love that you mentioned, an algae scrubber or refugium, or getting a better skimmer, as Holly did, or upping your mechanical filtration, as Dan said, so it can't be broken down into, things that need to be taken up. Because, even food on the bottom of the tank, which we talk about extensively, it's breaking up all the times. That's why you got to change your feeding habits and that kind of thing. Anything else you
But
guys? Go ahead, Dan.
yeah, well, the one thing I want to point out is that it's important to remember that with a seahorse tank, your nutrient levels are typically higher than in a reef tank,
Of course.
and it requires better filtration than a reef tank in terms of removing the organic matter.
Absolutely.
I
Go
just
ahead.
also wanted to add, just because of the dinos situation, doing my
Yes.
research, because my nitrates and my phosphate have both been, my phosphate has been very, very, very minimal, but my nitrates have been 0 for a very long time. And doing the research, I found out also that if you bottom them out too much, it can be also detrimental. There are people that dose nitrates and phosphates when they do have dinos. I know it's not. I just wanted to mention that because
No,
I didn't realize that. You're like, oh yay, look at me! I'm doing so good. Everything's 0. And no, it's not necessarily good.
You're right. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about, oh, I'm going to say it wrong. I think it's the Redfield ratio. I could be wrong. But anyways, you do need to balance, especially in a reef tank, guys. I know we're in seahorses here, but phosphates and nitrates. If you have too much or too little of any, you're just going to wreak havoc. So, Nicole, I'm not at all mad that you brought it up because that's a great point. But I just think we'll be better to discuss that next week when Kelly's had a chance to refresh her memory and get Cruz in here. Because you're right, and it does usually affect like a reef more, but you're not wrong. That's true. And with dinos especially, which aren't like an algae like you described, they're more of a bacteria. There's tricks you got to do. So if it keep mentioning and keep saying your questions and what's working for you or what you're doing, because these are things we want to bring up that are important that we're going to discuss next week. But let's just get through the algae cycle first. You feel me? Okay. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Okay, because dinos are like a hot topic in every group everywhere. So we need to dedicate a whole show to dinos. But all right, so the next question, you guys can pipe up anytime with tricks or anything you got to say, but why does algae grow on seahorses, snails, and other CUC? And can you remove it safely? Or I can answer my own
Repeat that.
question. Okay, good. Cheryl, why does algae grow literally on a seahorse and on your snails and all that?
She just gets stuck on the spine to the seahorse.
What?
The algae that they carry around usually means there's algae in the tank and they swim through it and they have the spines. And you normally get stuck on the spines. It's not actually growing on the seahorse. And that's why it usually brushes off.
You can
Dan?
also get filamentous algae growing on seahorses, and you have to remember that seahorses, unlike a fish, are somewhat sedentary, at least for periods of time where they're not swimming around constantly. So if the flow is too low, you can get not only the filamentous algae, but you can get other algae growing on them as well. And quite often, we'll see someone post a picture of what they think is skin peeling off the seahorse. In reality, it's algae peeling off. And in the wild, if you were to capture some of the wild caught in some of the estuaries, you would find that they're covered with algae. So the algae doesn't hurt the seahorse. It looks like crap for some people, but it really doesn't hurt them. And if you want to take them off, you need to be careful and need to be gentle using a very, very, very soft brush. Or some people will take a little bit of pantyhose over their finger and gently rub them. But if it was me, I wouldn't. I would just let nature take its course. It doesn't hurt the seahorse, and it will eventually start peeling off.
Yes.
I've never had algae on a seahorse.
I have had a snail on my seahorse.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, Holly, you're right. I want to hear what Cheryl said, and I know Marina was trying to talk too. But yeah, no, I agree. I've seen it, the snails, literally, and that's one of the problems. Someone jumping around, guys, sorry, but the stars, the Asterina stars, I think that's how you say it.
Those are deadly.
They are deadly, but they're more likely to crawl up on a seahorse if they're in the tank because they're eating the algae. They're not trying to kill the seahorse. They're trying to eat the algae. So while I believe what you said, Cheryl, I've seen it grow on seahorses. So maybe if you have the right flow and you see algae, it's just catching on the spines. But I've seen it grow on them, and it's ugly. And I've personally had trouble because I rubbed it, and the seahorse had issues because I rubbed into the skins. So you got to be really super careful. Holly, what were you saying?
Yeah.
Anything besides the
run-
snail?
I run high flow.
I did a water change once, and one of the tiny snails, I guess it washed it got on my seahorse's face and attached itself.
Oh, no.
And I was freaking out about what's wrong with my seahorse. Did he hurt himself or something? And I had to like really put on my reading glasses. Oh, he's got a tiny snail on his face. And I just knocked him off. It probably wouldn't have hurt him, I imagine, but I freaked out seeing it because I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, if it's not a star, if it's a snail, I kind of feel like it's cleaning the seahorse.
Doing
Now,
the job,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and I've seen a seahorse get irritated in my macro tank. I had these. I never did get an actual ID on what these things were. They weren't a snail. They weren't a flatworm. They were somewhere in between. They were not parasitic, and I found them on the seahorses all the time. And I was fine with them for a long time, but then the seahorses started acting irritated. If seahorse doesn't want something on it, you're gonna know it.
I see it.
They're gonna start flicking, trying to get it off, rubbing on stuff. And of course, with the Astrina stars, that's a whole different topic because they are burrowing through, eating through the skin, and then there's big trouble, and it happens like when they're asleep, so they can't flick it off or whatever. So that's different. But with snails, I always feel like unless the seahorse is irritated, and with algae, unless the seahorse is irritated. But what were you saying, Marina?
I was just going to say, I guess similar to what Dan said in a less sort of clever way. To my understanding, the seahorse's skin actually encourages algae growth. It's part of their camouflage.
It does. It is. Absolutely. Did I cut you off, or was that yes?
That was all.
Okay, no, I agree, and thank you for bringing it up because, yeah, I agree. It's part of their camouflage, and they will grow in the wild. And I've had tanks just like Dan described where hair algae did take over. I did nothing about it because, well, I had my personal issues, but bottom line is it was taking up the organics. It was taking up the phosphate and the nitrate and all that stuff. So the seahorses were fine, but the seahorses did grow algae on themselves to blend in with their environment. That's part of what they do. Dan, were you going to say something else?
In-tank algae scrubber.
In-tank algae scrubber is Dan's answer. Okay, I know we're having a conversation in the chat too. Do I need to go to that, or can I go to the next question? We'll look at all questions in the chat before we finish. But okay, Farm Boy, I read I read that problem all the time. Everyone thinks zero is good. It will cause big issues. It's all about keeping everything balanced. Yep. So that is why seahorses grow algae on them. Yeah, I personally think it's camouflage and just getting into their environment. Anybody else have a thought on that? Or I'm moving on. But you know what? Actually, to make sure we covered the answer to the question, personally, I would say if you see algae on your seahorses, don't take pictures for that couple of weeks because it's not hurting anything. It's not hurting them. They're probably doing it on purpose and, allowing it to grow on them. The snails will probably take care of it, or it will cycle itself out and you will see it go away without ever touching them. However, if it's really bugging you, or you've got to have that Instagram post tomorrow, just kidding, guys. But if you did, then you can lightly scrub it off. Just be extremely careful. Dan gave a couple of tips on how. Soft brush, nylons over the finger. Is that what you said, Dan?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other tips anybody's got?
Pantyhose.
Pantyhose, sorry. Nylons. Yes. Okay. Anyways, anybody else got any other tips for removing it? I know Lucy does, and Lucy was trying to join us tonight, and I don't think I sent her the ID. So Lucy, if you're watching, I'm sorry. We're gonna make sure you're here next week. But if you have a comment in the comment section, because I absolutely know that you have other methods for getting algae off of seahorses. And Chris Carey, thank you for the super chat. You're awesome. Anytime you guys are loving what we're talking about or want to support the stream, there's super chat, super stickers, lots of different things. But go on. All right. And Mermaids Reef said, try a bubbler. Mine would use the bubbles to get the algae off. Right! We've talked so many times about people who are afraid of flow in seahorse tanks or bubblers, especially because of their, and we're going to have Cruz on, talk about micro bubbling. Dang phone. But absolutely, you'll see a seahorse get into the bubbles like a shower. I posted a picture of a seahorse literally hitched to the cord that led to my wave maker. And I had it covered, of course, to protect them. So the tail was hitched to the cord. He was laying on the wave maker, so you know it's blowing up at him, and he had his head bopping. Okay, this is why y'all come though, isn't it? To see me do stupid stuff. But anyways, bopping in the flow. Go ahead, Dan.
The flow will also help in that sometimes they will get protozoans crawling on them, and they'll get in the flow to blow them off.
Has anybody else noticed pregnant males like to get bubble massages?
I have, but
a little off subject.
Really quick, guys, just to finish up that question, and Laura, if you would like to further that question, because it was your question, you're the one that sent it in. I really appreciate when you come in. Did you have it?
Great. This is great. Thank you.
Okay, and just for anybody else, what about cleanup crew? What about snails? Does it matter if algae grows on them? Or how can you get it off if you want to?
With the snail, you can just grab a toothbrush or whatever and just scrub it off the shell. They're not really going to be, as long as you don't touch their foot or their flesh, they're not going to be too bothered.
Absolutely agree. I actually, when I get snails in, I do that before I add them. Because of the fact that, you know, you don't, I just do it. I scrub them, their shell, not their foot, as she said, before I add them to the tank. And then if they grow algae or whatever, they don't have the skin of a seahorse. Seahorses don't have a shell. They don't even have scales. So it's just different. But anyone else?
I just pull it off the shell if I see one with a tail. Other than that, I just leave them alone. And
yeah, sometimes the green swirls are kind of pretty. I mean, it's pretty. Okay, let's see.
If you run out of algae in the tank, you'll sometimes see them actually climbing onto each other's shells, just trying to find something to eat.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, you know what? I'm going to call it open chat at this point. We can still talk algae, or if there's anyone in the comment section that had a question, we will cover that now. Or if anyone had anything to share that's not related, we'll cover that now. Look at us, doing better. We're only an hour in. Yay! Because we started late. All right, so and I'm going to look through the questions. Is there anything else about nuisance algae that we need to cover? Laura or anyone?
Flamethrower.
Yeah.
Pressure washer.
Okay, wait. Flamethrower, pressure washer. Laura, what was the actual question, or did you have any?
So before I met you guys, I was doing a lot of reading, and it was suggested to me somewhere I read about Rowaphos. So I immediately got a media reactor, fluidized, and Rowaphos. And of course, it has brought my phosphate levels like way down, because, well, they weren't very high. They were, I think, 5, and now they're like 2. But I wondered what you guys thought of that.
Anyone else before I speak? Go ahead.
I know people that have used them. I know they're used extensively in reef systems for that purpose. I have never used one, so I really can't comment on how effective they are.
I'm trying to cover all the questions here. Anyone else have thoughts on that? Do you use any kind of phosphate removers? That's what it is, right?
That's what it is. It's a phosphate remover.
Right.
And it works.
Right.
Yeah.
Now wait, Laura, I'm curious. You said it works. So did this work out for you?
Yes, it worked out for me. A lot of my algae went down.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And was this in reef or seahorse tank?
Seahorse. I don't have a reef tank.
Nice.
I have, yeah. I just have. I have a 42-gallon tank. 5 gallons are in the sump, and then I have 2 seahorses, and I have 2 serpent stars from Alyssa,
Awesome.
and 2 of her little yellow sea cucumbers that I thought were real cute, and then some snails, and that's it.
Well, hey, if you're ready to turn your camera on, we'd love to see the tank. Actually, they're probably asleep, right? But
yeah, I'll show you. Let me turn my
oh, yay! We love when people show.
Okay.
And I would go ahead.
Okay, so here it is.
Oh, let me make you big real quick. Hang on 1 second, because I gotta get there.
Horses are sleeping.
I just switched it to gallery view.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Hang on 1 second. Can you pin her video? I think it worked on my end. Okay, go ahead.
Can you see it?
Well, I'm seeing me in the middle of it. A reflection of your computer. I'll tell you what.
Yeah. I'll send you a picture.
Yeah, send me a picture and then we'll post it and it's
That's right. You have a nice reflection.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't say that. But okay. Well, thank you for trying to show us, and we will absolutely post a picture linked to this so that people can see it. But I agree with you, and I'm so glad you brought it up. This is why we need more people to join and comment, because that's something that we didn't even discuss or think of to discuss, is that you can use certain media and certain phosphate removing products and such that do work for people.
For what it's worth, I tried for this algae that I have, this reddish purple stuff. I put phosphate remover in a reactor. Never changed it at all.
I do think it depends on what type of algae you're dealing with. I really do. And I'm now promising that I will either get Cruz's comments or get him on the show next week to discuss, because he's so good with this nuisance algae stuff and how to remove dinos and all of that kind of things. And he has opinions on all of these things too. But has anyone else used phosphate? Because the thing is, as was brought up earlier, there's this red line, red field, something like that ratio that's discussed in the more scientific magazines about reef keeping. And you gotta, once you take phosphate out, if nitrate's high, it's gonna cause cyano or something like that. If you have nitrates gone, but you have phosphate high, it's gonna cause hair algae. I'm not quoting that because I'm probably saying it incorrectly, but you gotta, if you don't you only get your tank in balance when it's in balance. So sometimes I worry about phosphate removers, as I think Holly pointed out earlier, maybe it was Nicole. No, it was Nicole. Sometimes when it comes to dinos, people are dosing nitrates because they're trying to get it back into line with the phosphates. So it's just, yeah. Anybody else have comments? Because I'm rambling and it's such a huge topic that there's so much going on.
I actually ran in my reef tank, started running into issues when my nitrate and phosphate bottomed out.
Right.
It had previously been high, and sort of over the course of like 6 months, we got it down. And then I guess what we were doing, sort of, it was that thing of working too well. And we had 0.0 nitrate, 0.0 phosphate. And that's when we started, after a few weeks to maybe a couple months of that, that's when we started running into these weird algae and other issues.
Absolutely. And especially in a reef tank. Dan, were you going to say something?
No, I was looking at Dylan's question.
Okay, yeah, you're right. And let's talk more about the ratios and bottoming out. We can obviously talk about it now, but I don't have any answer for you. You're right. You're right. And go ahead with Dylan's question, because I see a couple questions we didn't cover already previously. Go ahead.
Well, Dylan's asking about using freshwater bacteria for starting a saltwater cycle. And in theory, you might be able to get it started that way, but as soon as you up the salinity, you're going to knock back that bacteria. It's different species of bacteria. And we say nitrobacter and we say nitrosomas, but in reality, there's different species or subspecies within that. And generally speaking, it's not going to work very well to do it that way. You're better off starting your saltwater cycle with saltwater and using saltwater bacteria. Um, it's just not going to be very stable if you start with freshwater bacteria.
Agreed. Absolutely. And I do see that Chris has joined us. Woo! Chris, I didn't mean to call you out. Sorry. If you're just wanting to chit chat in the after show, feel free to just hang out for a minute until I end the stream. But if you have any tips, like what do you tell people that call you and say the seahorses are lovely and great, but the tank is filled with algae and it's growing on the seahorses? What do I do?
I don't actually really have that many customers call up with that issue.
Nice.
So I'm pretty lucky I get to avoid that one.
Nice. Okay, well, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. All right. Dan, what other questions, or anyone in the video that has questions or things they want to talk about, feel free. But Dan, what other questions did I miss? I saw a few. I saw that, look, I'm literally having to check myself. Freshwater experience only. Okay. Someone mentioned, and I think that Cheryl mentioned earlier, lights out dealing with nuisance algae. Has that worked for everybody or not? Cheryl, what was your lights out experience? Go ahead, Dan.
Well, the last time I did it was basically a bare, no, it was not a bare bottom tank. And I was growing a lot of green hair algae. And what I did is I turned the lights off, did a couple of big water changes, and over the next couple of weeks, pulled out all the rocks and scrubbed them. Never had another problem when I turned the lights back on. Don't ask me why. But I have found.
I would say you can turn.
I have found when I have a higher flow using wave makers, power heads, whatever, it does dramatically reduce the amount of algae that I get in a tank.
I would say do a reduced time period with lights, but the problem with seahorses and turning lights out is unlike a toddler. You turn the lights out, they go to bed.
Yeah.
And when it comes time to feeding, you really need the lights on to get them to feed correctly.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, if you have a lot of lights in the room, you can use that in lieu of anything on the tank. And that's what I was doing with that. But you're right, Dan. I agree. Turn the lights off. They're going tonight.
Yep.
Yeah. They're like me that wasted a week with lights out. Okay, anyways, Mermaid's Reef said bare bottom won't work for her tank. Her 3-year-old's favorite part of the display is the sand. I feel you. That's why we've covered a little bit today, and we're going to cover more extensively next week, how to fix it when you have issues with sand and dinos and that kind of thing. It's not a bad thing. Sand is beneficial. Just in seahorse tanks, I mean, you guys, how many people have sand in their tanks? I know Marina does. Nicole, do you?
I do.
Nicole does. Laura, do you? She must be gone. Holly is gone too. All right, so I have both. I love the look of a natural tank.
You have both in one tank?
No, no. I have tanks that have sand. Seahorse tanks that have sand. I have tanks that are bare bottom. I have more luck with the bare bottom, but it does take a lot more filtration than a sump. You could never pull off a bare bottom without a sump.
Well, the biggest thing is with people starting out, they're better off with sand because the tank overall, if there is a mistake with that sand bed, the tank is going to be a lot more stable.
Agreed.
If you're doing bare bottom, it's a lot easier. If something goes wrong, you've got to really stay on top of them a lot more.
No, that's a great point, Cheryl, because anybody new, you might want to have the sand bed just for the extra place that nitrifying bacteria can grow so you don't kill the tank and have ammonia problems and a big mess. I feel like somebody was trying to talk.
They forget to turn filtration back on for an hour or so.
Right.
You got a stand bed. You test that tank. It's not going to change. Nothing's going to have changed. You do that in a high density stocking, high stocking density, and a bare bottom.
Right.
You've already got problems.
I'm so glad you made that point because we talk so much about how some of us prefer bare bottom, but you're absolutely right. It's safer with sand. Even though it might become more of an algae issue, you're safer with sand. Good point. Chris, I feel like someone was trying to talk. If I'm wrong, give me 2 seconds of silence and I'll move on. Okay. All right. Nobody was trying to talk. Okay. I thought someone was. Sorry. I just want to make sure everyone can. Go ahead, Marina.
You could also just use, if you don't want sand because you don't want to deal with all the issues that sand comes with, you could use a lot more biomedia, like maybe not marine pure, but like AMS blocks or mantis blocks, or I'm not sure if they're Australian brands, if you guys have the same ones or not, but highly porous, like really high surface area ceramic media that doesn't break down and crumble into dust and stuff, but provides you that sort of benefit that sand does. Other than looking pretty, the only benefit of sand really is it's got such a high surface area.
You're correct, Marina. And those of us in the commercial areas, we use a lot of biomedia. In our case, we use the K1 media, but there's a number of different products that can do the same thing. And you can even create your own using rock rubble or what have you. You know, the sand also gives the benefit of not only having a biological area for nitrification and denitrification if it's set up in that way, is that it can also, it's hard to keep Nasaria snails and things like that in a bare bottom tank. So having a sand bed allows you to, even though the macroalgae doesn't really have a root, it allows them a place to use as a hold fast and allows you to put other tank mates in the tank as well.
Thank you, Dan, because I kind of misspoke Dylan's question earlier. Sorry, Dylan, because he was asking, I'm sorry, not Dylan, Mermaid's Reef. Anyways, the point was sand was the 3-year-old's favorite and the snails popping out of it. And you can't keep Nasaria snails without sand. So, absolutely.
And they're one of my favorites.
I know, me too.
I've got some that I've had for almost 5 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
And all of a sudden they're back again.
I get that with the little, I'm gonna forget the name now, guys, but the little circular ones that you can't buy.
Turbos?
What were they?
Turbos?
No. Like
No.
tiny circular ones. You usually find them in your pipe. They're amazing, but you can't buy them. Who said it?
Stomellas?
That's not it, but I'll post it
I
later.
know what you're talking about because I have a ton of them, and they always get in the filter sock. And when you're clean,
actually, I think Maureen
socks, I'm dumping them out. All these little teeny round snails.
Yep.
I have those.
I think Marina said it correctly. I just didn't hear the pronunciation because I think I personally pronounced it stomatella or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that what you said, Marina?
Yeah.
Okay.
I probably say it.
No,
I'm probably saying it wrong.
It's
or
probably
with an accent.
me.
Y'all speaking
They're
Italian
really cool
now.
little guys.
Vino. That's all I know. Anyways,
just call baby snails.
Baby snails. But those are amazing. Somebody should breed them because I need to buy them. They're really great, especially for a seahorse tank. Okay. I don't know if I missed any other questions. I'm trying to go through them without seeming rude to everyone in the video. So is there anything else anybody wanted to chat about? I'm glad we're cutting down the time. Go ahead. And we will I'm sorry. I say talk and then I cut you guys off. Sorry. Welcome to my show. Anyhow, we will cover dinos. I'll try to get Cruz here, but we will cover it next week. I've made the decision we're going to cover it. So that's next week. Go ahead, Dan.
No, I wasn't going to say anything specific. But Mermaid was talking about the adding more, and you guys were talking about the breeding of the other one. We tried breeding the Nasarius snails, and unfortunately, it just takes too bloody long to make it worthwhile. They're too cheap.
That is a problem for sure.
Yeah, they're very prolific in terms of laying eggs.
Yeah, but getting them to grow in a small tank and getting numbers is very difficult. You know, you
I'm
almost
sure.
need a huge surface area to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those are one of my favorite snails.
Okay, so I did see Mermaids Reef said Milev's, sorry, Reef Critter ID is great for all those little snail IDs. Agreed. And I posted in a past Wine Wednesday in the chat comment section. I really like this old WordPress Joe's something or other snail ID because he goes through which macros they'll eat, whether they'll eat macros, whether they'll eat this and that. And you can literally buy snails based on what you're trying to get rid of or based on making sure they don't eat your pretty display macros in the tank, which is another episode, guys, coming. I promise we're going to talk pretty macros instead of nuisance. And Dylan's asked how to improve macro growth. I think that's, and how to improve macro growth to fight off algae. That'll be in the macro episode, my friend, because when you're talking about display macros, it's a totally different topic. And when you're talking about using sump macros, whether it be a scrubber or a refugium, that's more about the lighting and just making sure it gets what it needs to outcompete anything in the display. So, all right. So, yeah. Anything else? Open chat, guys. Anything you wanted to? Anything going on? Ray, what happened with your situation?
Nothing's changed with it. It's still alive, but doesn't eat, and it still has that problem. The trigger isn't stuck down anymore.
Good.
But when you see that every respiration, you see that little bowing of the lower jaw.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's a bowstring that somebody's bending every time it takes in the water. And it won't eat anymore. And I sedated it and put a cannula down in to make sure that there wasn't any blockage. And I can get the cannula into past the gills, so that's not a problem. So I'm expecting to lose it, but once they stop eating, like it can take a month or more for them to pass. But now I've never come across anything like it before. Well, I shouldn't say that. It was back in 2010 when I had the barbs before. I had a similar problem, but at that time I can't recall ever having the trigger stuck down like it was this time. But then again, now the trigger was stuck down for a long time, no longer is.
So you're doing.
That had something to do with it went away initially, but then after it would come back again and then go away. But since I sedated it and put the cannula into the snout, the trigger's never been stuck down since then.
That's so interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Cheryl.
No, I'm just saying that's weird because usually once they start bringing that trigger down, it's not going away when it gets really bad. It almost makes me wonder if the seahorse had a mechanical injury that was causing it.
Well, it's out of my line of experience in my years, that's for sure.
Yeah, I have no idea for sure.
Well, when I had those barbs before back in 10, I lost them. They all come down with it and they all died. And this is the first, well, I've had these barbs now, what, 4.5 years.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it appears again. You know, whether it's just a coincidence that it was barbs both times, I don't know.
I can't say I've ever seen it.
Yeah. Could you see what I meant, Dan, on that video? Were you able to see below the jaw?
Ray, my apologies. I was real busy when you sent it to me, and it got buried, but between other messages, I need to go back and look at it.
Well, I don't think there's going to be any answers anyway, but
No, I want to look at it. I got sidetracked, and like many things, once I get sidetracked, I got so many things coming in that I sometimes miss it.
it's like when you see it against the light, excuse me, it almost looks like there's a thin bone running from the front of the snout to back below the eyes, but down at the bottom of the snout, and that this thin bone bends downwards and upwards, downwards and back upwards again.
Is it or is it the trigger that you're seeing?
No, this isn't the trigger. It looks like a thin bone going along the length of the bottom of the jaw.
Wow.
I can play the video and I can put it up on screen share if you want me to, Kelly.
Well, heck yeah. And then guys, listen, before he does that, Dan, give me 1 second. I was just going to say we're trying to cut the time on this. So after this topic, we're going to cut it for the night after the final question from Mermaid's Reef, which I did see. And then any other questions we see will be covered in following weeks. You can always post and say you want this topic covered, or come to Seahorse Whisperer Society and let us know you want to talk for sure. All right, we're going with Dan. Let me see if this worked. I think Dan took over.
Did it come up?
Hang on. Let's make sure that everybody's seeing it.
Okay,
let me make sure on the video. Okay, go ahead.
All right, I'm playing the video now.
Yeah, it's not good enough to show.
Do you want me to make it?
I see it on my screen, but if you look underneath the eye, just behind the eye, you can see the little area poking down.
Do you want me to make it bigger or not?
But where it comes down the lowest is halfway between the end of the snout and the eye.
Hang on, Dan. If you're able to replay
Wow.
it, let me make it bigger.
Okay.
It's like a bone, right? Going straight down behind the eye.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to remake this.
I do see it.
All right, can you replay now?
It's constantly going.
Okay.
It's looping.
I mean, I can see the trigger. That doesn't that's I've seen before, but the stuff one that's farther down on the snout has got me totally puzzled.
It's not a.
I see it too.
It looks like it's fastened right about where that cursor is now, a little bit to the left.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Right in the middle there. That's what comes down. It bulges outwards or downwards, I should say. But up here, or up at the eye end or at the snout end,
yeah,
it doesn't bulge. It stays in place like you're pulling a bowstring.
Right.
That does make me think, like Cheryl said, a mechanical injury. But Ray, you said this happened before in the same tank? Different seahorses?
Not the same tank. This is
maybe a Barbori thing.
It was 2010.
Hey, Dan,
I think, the other ones. I got
have
them
you ever
from,
seen that?
Mick Payne in Australia, the other ones.
Wow.
That was a long time ago. But he hasn't been in business now for quite a while.
So you're saying maybe it's a Barbori species thing, or maybe it's a mechanical injury.
I don't really have any idea, but
right.
It's just a case of, because it was both barbs, and it just makes me wonder.
Well, I'd like to get Chris's input if he's seen anything like that. I haven't, but Chris, you guys have barbs down there. Have you ever seen anything like this?
This barb came from Chris.
Chris, your sound is turned off. Chris, if you can hear me, your sound is turned off.
He might not be.
He's back now.
Okay.
You can hear me now. Fantastic. Yeah, good. I haven't actually seen this in the barbs. So it's not one that I'm familiar with. It's not one that I've come across.
Gotcha.
And I think we're seeing your dog, Dan. Stop sharing your screen because
I'm trying to figure out how to do it now.
it's fine. It's just I can't turn off the full screen because you did it before I did as the host.
Where the hell is my damn full screen thingy?
Well, that didn't work. Okay.
Cute
So,
puppy.
yeah, I know, right? Cute puppy. Anyways. All right, here, I'm going to try to. Okay. Yeah, it's got to be you. Maybe up
Well,
at the top or down and share screen. Hit share screen.
I don't have that available.
Okay. Maybe up at the top, go to very top of your Zoom. Go to gallery view. No big deal. We're
Crap.
getting ready to cut it. It's not a big deal. But
I may have to exit out and come right back in. But if I exit out, I'm gone. Then the whole thing stopped. No.
nope. You should be able to exit out, guys. If we end in this note, we'll be back next week. Dan, go ahead and exit out.
Okay.
Okay. Happy Wednesday. If I go away, we shall see in a moment. We're seeing a beautiful, beautiful picture. I believe that's Abby on the boat. Dogs. Yes.
Yeah, I exited full screen myself.
I'm going to sign.
Sign me.
See the view options.
You're not listed. There you are. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Oh, you're back.
Okay. There we go. You don't even have to leave. We're good. Oh, he left. Okay. All right. Anyways, guys. So yeah, Ray, nobody's got any answers for you, but we're gonna keep watching and keep updating. It's really cool to me that you've managed to get further in this. Like the seahorse is still alive. You're figuring it out. So.
Well, they take a long time to die.
Oh.
I've had that before when the seahorse stops eating. It'll take them months, sometimes 2 months before they die.
You're kidding.
No, it's not something that they're not going to die of starvation in a very short time. It takes a long time. As a matter of fact, they don't necessarily even get thin. This one hasn't thinned out anymore. And what's it been, 3 weeks?
All right, I'm going to ask the question that any hobbyist would ask. If they can't, okay, he might not be able to get back in. I'm trying to read. All right, okay, got it. If a seahorse will not die of starvation for months, why is it so freaking necessary for us to feed them 3 times a day?
Seahorses do not, basically, they get their nutrition from lipids, particularly DHA and EPA. And what happens is if they do not have lipids coming in, they are going to slowly starve to death. It doesn't mean it's going to happen right away because seahorses and many other fish cannot use protein as their energy source. And depending on activity level and a lot of other factors, temperatures, is going to determine how fast they're going to totally use up that lipid reserve. And Dan sent me a study. They found in neonatal seahorses, Hippocampus erectus, they could last 5 days without food.
Wow. But 5 days is different.
Then they would be dead.
Well, the 5 days is different than months. So that was kind of,
these were newborn seahorses.
Oh, okay. And I'm not disagreeing with you. And I was hoping that, and Dan wasn't here, but I was hoping the question, Dan, was, Ray mentioned that he's had this different experiences happen before and that seahorses won't starve to death, which is terrible to even discuss, but seahorses won't starve to death for months. So my question was, as a newbie hobbyist, why in the world do we have to feed them 3 times a day, and is feeding such a huge issue with us when, they don't starve that easily, as easily as it sounds like? But I was hoping someone would make the argument that they grow weaker and their immunity goes down and they are more immune to.
Well, what happens is that, as Cheryl was saying, they use their lipids as their energy source.
Yep.
But after a certain period of time, and I think that time is going to vary based upon the age and the condition of the seahorse, once they've used up those lipid reserves, they then go to the protein as their energy source. Once that occurs, you're usually at the point of no return.
Right.
So even if they start eating at that point, a lot of times they won't come back. Some do, but many times they will not come back because their metabolism has changed. And even if they're eating, they're not getting enough to basically make it. Now, I can tell you that the exact time frame can vary, and I think a lot of that has to do with how much energy they're using. For example, I've seen shipments of seahorse. I say I've seen. I know of shipments of seahorses that have been in shipping for 12 days. Open up the box, put them back in the tank, and they did fine. Now, in that case, the lights were out. It was in a dark box, so they were staying hitched. They weren't swimming around and doing a whole bunch of stuff. If they're in a tank with the lights on and everything else going on, I don't think they'll last as long. It used to be on the org, everybody used to say after 5 days, you're going to lose your seahorse if they don't eat.
Mhm.
Well, I found that that's not necessarily true. That time can vary. Sometimes it is 5 days, sometimes it's much longer than that.
But don't
Uh,
risk it, people. Don't risk it.
no,
But
no.
go ahead.
I've found it hard to get them to eat if they go more than 4 or
Yep.
5 days. It's
I
hard
agree
to
with
get
Well,
them
that.
to eat afterwards.
yes.
There's that point beyond no return where they're not going to come back no matter what you do. What I'm trying to figure out is what is that bone-looking appendage underneath the snout that's visible in that video.
Well, it's almost like there's some type of deformity there that's allowing that to bulb out. And what it is, I don't know. And I can only guess. I would be speaking on my behind if I tried to say what it is.
Yeah, I have no idea. I've never seen it.
Do we want to answer
Interesting.
Mermaid's question?
Yes, interesting. I was just going to say interesting that Ray's seen it twice. Different seahorses, different places he got them. So I'm saying this in case some future scientific study proves that Barbori have this deformity. Just curious. Anyways, yes, let's answer Mermaid's question, and then I'm cutting it for the night. I was trying to cut it down, and now we're reaching the 2 hour point again. This show is just so interesting. Go ahead, Dan.
All right. Mermaid was asking about dosing probiotics in a main display and that she's seen it mentioned for fry tanks.
Yep.
And what I can say is that probiotics for a tank are much like probiotics for people. They can be a benefit. If you have a perfect system, you probably aren't going to notice much difference by putting probiotics in the tank. In a commercial setting where we have overstock tanks, probiotics can be very beneficial. And in tanks that are not perfectly balanced, overstocked, uh, had problems with seahorses, then it may be a good idea to dose the probiotics. The probiotics that most of us use, such as the Inve Mike F, is going to uh, eat the excess organics in the water, and they're going to combat with pathogenic bacteria for
Tanya,
space through competitive exclusion.
grab
And
the white,
I've had people who've used
go to the
probiotics both in
fridge,
reef tanks
grab the
and in
white
seahorse tanks.
canister
Some people have
in the
noticed a
side
great
door.
difference in using them. Some people have noticed no
Hurry.
difference. And I think the difference really in that case is, one had a much better, more balanced tank than the other did. Not harmful, but not always necessarily needed. But if you're having health issues or if you have an overstock situation, I would recommend them.
I'm so sorry, folks. I was trying to be slick and I muted myself in the Zoom, but I didn't mute myself on the. So I'm sorry if I overspoke you, Dan. I was just trying to show what we're talking about, the mic F, because I finally got it. That stuff is the bomb. And I personally use it in display tanks, as you've advised, as you described, for certain circumstances. I don't use it all the time.
Yep.
But I do in a fry tank. So, all right. Any
I,
other? Go ahead.
I can remember the Cyano Wars back in the early 90s. I think Reef Central had the biggest participation for it, but you had so many people dead against it and a few people that were for it. And it literally was a war with the threads that were going on then.
Well, it's gotten a lot easier. When we first started using probiotics, we had to cook them, if you will. We would get the stuff and we would have to add carbon to them and keep checking them underneath the scope to make sure that when we got the counts high enough, we could dose with it. And it's the stuff, the Sanolife is very easy to use because it's spores and all you have to do is add the powder to the tank and you're done.
Yeah.
And it takes a small amount. Chris, down under, do you guys use anything like that or can you say?
Yeah, no, we don't use probiotics. I'm not actually sure if they're fully legal in Australia. I know they're trying to bring them in, but I haven't
Sanolife
really been
is
able to
sold in
catch 'em.
Australia. There is a distributor in Australia that sells Sanolife.
There you go. It'll only be fairly recent then. I know probably about 3 or 4 years ago there wasn't any probiotics on the market.
And I could see like if something's working, you know, if you don't have problems, I guess that was my point. Like I use probiotics when I'm having problems. Go ahead, Dan.
Right. The problem there is just, as a breeder, we use probiotics a lot. Um, and we use it to head off problems before they develop. So when you have a system that is functioning and you're using probiotics, some people say, well, they're not doing anything for me. Well, you don't know that.
Right.
It's just like people that take probiotics. Are they really being beneficial or are they not? And I like using them. I've had success using them. I've had higher uh, production numbers by using probiotics. But I'll also say if I had everything perfect, then the probiotics probably aren't doing as much.
Well,
So
what we really need is for Dan's feed with probiotics to come back on the
it's coming
market.
back. I just
Okay.
I had a call yesterday talking to somebody, and I'm getting things in line to put both the probiotics and the Dan's feed back online.
Woo! That'll make such a big difference. Yay! Clap, clap, clap. Hey Ray, final question for
That's
you.
awesome.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Maria.
I just said that's awesome that his food will be back.
Yes, because Dan's feed with probiotics and Dan's feed regular is you can't beat it. Period. On the market. I mean, period. But
I use those for my fry above all else, and it really makes a difference.
Ray, I gotta ask one final question. What's the big blue arrow that turns red behind your head?
Sorry, what was this?
What's the blue arrow when you back up? Sit back. I'll talk louder. The blue arrow that's pointing at something and it turns red. You don't see it? Am I crazy, you guys?
It's not an arrow or anything. That's
on the
my
computer,
treadmill.
Kelly.
I thought it was like
My treadmill's in the living room. So if I put it down in the basement, well, first of all, there's not much room in the basement because there's so much junk. But also, if I put it in the basement, I'm not going to go downstairs and use it.
I love it.
I use that every day. I do 7.7 kilometers every day on it. Now, I can't use it like normal. Like when I walk with a walker, and the walker has a platform on it because I can't use the handles. This one here has a platform across it. It's a floating platform, so I'm able to lean on it with my elbows crossed or just grab on the edges of it. And because the floating platform moves every time I take a step, because the board's moving, it takes the stress off my torn, yeah.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Shoulder, a torn muscle, common one.
And I was just going to say, that's freaking awesome. I wasn't at all trying to make fun because I think that's awesome. And I was just jealous because I want a big blue sign that goes like, I'm awesome. But that's not what you were using it for. So
actually, what you're seeing is just, it's not an arrow. It's just the way the light from the TV is hitting it.
Nobody cared. I only cared because I wanted one. Nobody's okay. All right, guys. And if you have anything else, shout it out now because I'm cutting the live stream. We'll be back next week with more fun-filled
And next week's topic. Next week's topic.
I'm gonna say it's dinoflagellates and how to deal with those. Is that okay?
Yep.
Good.
Flamethrower.
Okay. Just and we can. I mean, they are even more terrible in a seahorse tank. They're more likely in a reef, but we need to cover it, and then we'll get back to any topics that you guys always send us, fry, anything like that. We're going to cover it. But let's cover dinos next week just to get Cruz in here and cover Nicole's issues. She's a loyal, okay, I'm going to shut up now.
I'll bring my T-Rex.
Love,
Marina, go ahead.
love the floating head, Dan.
Floating head Dan is always awesome. He's trying to show off because I pointed out Ray's blue arrow. That's not a blue arrow. Okay. All right, guys. I'm gonna cut it off. Everybody say bye. We'll be back next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Chris will give you more
Bye.
time.
Yeah, that's right. See you.
Oh, that was like harmony. It was like the guys and then the girls. Oh, it was so sweet. But okay, Chris, we'll give you more time in a
Only a
future
woman would
episode.
do that.
Okay. Happy Wine Wednesday, everyone. Cheers.